So, hi Rentia, how are you?
Hi, Sarika. I'm well, thank you. Busy day, but excited to be here.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I think just as we were having our pre-podcast recording convo, just that realness of the rush through the day to get to this point is here with me. And there's this moment of like, wow, our very first podcast.
Mm.
You know, and I'm holding an appreciation of this being only 7 months after we launched the motherhood.
Mm. Sure.
But I think
You're
as has
right.
become customary for us, Rensha, as we arrive in this space, is just to take what I've like to learn to say a moment of grace. So if we just want to take a moment between us to arrive into the space before we start our conversation.
Thank you. Sure. Always thank you for that, Sarika. I always feel so grounded when you get me to do this. I know I usually run and are so action orientated, and I love that. One of the things you bring into my life is this pause and be. So thank you for the discipline of starting there. I'm excited to be here this morning for our first recording. It's something that I know we've been talking about and dreaming about for a long time. And I won't lie, there's a mix of excitement and a bit of nervousness in me. And luckily, the bigger part is excitement. So, yeah, I can't wait to get started.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's interesting. I had a yoga class this morning, as you know, and when I got into the car, I did a little voice recording around how I'm feeling and exactly those two words. And I became
Mm.
curious as to whether there was a word that combined those two, the nervousness
Mm.
and the excitement. So there's something first there. Um, I think as this is our first time, in this space, in this format, I wonder if it's not useful for us to start by sharing a little bit of the backstory to how we got here, and also just, how we met, and how the motherhood was born. So,
Mm.
yeah, if we maybe just want to start by sharing a little bit about ourselves, if you wouldn't mind going first, Rensha.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so if I look at the roles in my life, which is usually where we start to describe ourselves, a wife to one husband. We've been married for, I think, coming to about 20 years now. I have two gorgeous kids, the light of my life, ages 12 and 15 at this point in time. And yeah, I think one of the things that we'll talk much more about in our time to come is how my life has changed because of them, and the decisions that I make on a daily basis is to be the mother that I want to be for them. So yeah, they are a big part of my life. And then the other part that I derive much meaning and joy from is my profession. I'm a registered industrial psychologist and a professional coach. I have a private practice, two private practices, one locally and one abroad. And I love working in collaboration. So I have a number of collaborators across the globe, working across different fields within the domain of industrial psychology. And then on a personal level, I love reading. I haven't been able to read a lot when my kids were younger, but in the last few years, I've picked that up. And very much more recently, I started running again. I think one of my self care practices that I miss and that I now thoroughly enjoy. I always joke in truth to say that I run for mental health reasons. And yes, some weeks I run very far until I find my sanity, and then I have to run again tomorrow to go and fetch it again. But yeah, that's a little bit about me. Yeah, I'd love to maybe also pass that over to you to ask us to introduce yourself.
Yeah. I mean, thanks, Rensha. I think, when we were prepping this and I thought you were running really, even as you mentioned it now, I noticed this big smile break onto my face. And I really look forward to that time in my life where I can get back into my running. Because, as you know, I've even run marathons. And I must say, not that it's an excuse, but, since I've become a mom, finding the time and space for that is quite hard. But we've got lots of episodes to talk about that. I think in terms of describing myself, I often describe myself as spirit being human, which talks about the importance of my spirituality to me. Um, and then I think just anchored in values is probably the other thing I want to say. So my top three values, technically they're four because I combine two of them. So my first one's freedom. And then courage and tenacity kind of sit very closely for me, and I think the third one is authenticity. I kind of am who I am. I bring all of my quirkiness where I go, and I think people appreciate that about me, or at least that's what they say. In terms of my career, people professional, started off in HR, moved into management consulting for a while, and then into a specialized area of organizational development. And then 2 years ago, decided to go out on my own and establish this human and organizational development consultancy. A part of that journey, you've been a part of that journey with me. I think it was a huge leap of faith, and I'm so grateful for that sort of peer space that you provided for me during that time when I was thinking about what to do, how to live into that value of freedom for me in a more meaningful way. Um, and I think, in fact, when we first spoke and I heard you speak about, where you were at already, there was something that was sparked in me around, hey, this is real and it's possible. And then I think, self-care, I want to say I wrote thesis on it, literally. So I think that will come up. But what's really super important in terms of me is quiet time. I'm realizing more and more how much I need that stillness, whether it's through yoga, whether it's through meditation. And it's an ongoing challenge and practice for me. Some days I get it right, some days I don't, and I need to learn to have grace with myself on the days that I don't. Um, and then, yeah, I guess the other part of me is I really have quite an adventurous spirit. I love dancing. At the moment, I do Oriental dancing and ballroom and Latin American. And then I just love traveling in languages. So, yeah, I think that's me in the nutshell.
Wow. See, I've even learned something about you that I didn't know before. I didn't know
Really?
the dancing to that extent. I knew you loved dancing, but I didn't know that. Being real, big part of my family is animals, and my doggy is scratching at the door. So I'm just going to
Yes,
open the door for a moment because
sure.
whether you hear it or not, on the recording, it is distracting me. There we go.
Thank you for being real. And I think that's part of the space we're wanting to create, right? Is we bring ourselves, as we are. Yeah.
As we are. Sarika, it's really lovely to I think pause and just again appreciate who we are as people. And I think a part that I think we might want to venture into is just hearing a little bit about our stories of how this topic of supporting mothers, supporting professional working moms, how that was born as a pattern in both our lives.
Mm, mm.
I
Yeah.
have a picture. I have a mental picture of what I've heard you describe before. Do you mind sharing that with the rest?
Yeah. I'm going to start it maybe somewhere that you're not accustomed to me starting. Because when I was thinking about it, I realized this is a really important part that I've never actually shared before in this context, in our context, which is becoming a parent was a very conscious, considered decision for myself and for my husband. And the reason I say that is I was what, I guess at a point in time was considered an older mom. So I was 38 when I decided, yes, this is it. I want to have a child. Prior to that, I'd gone through fluctuations. But a big part of that being a very conscious consideration was I had a medical history that pregnancy would have put me at risk for, of a return of the issue I was dealing with. So very, very conscious decision. Fortunately for us, we were able to both fall pregnant and have a really easeful, beautiful pregnancy and an easy birth. So that's something I'm very grateful for. So I think that's kind of the where it started. And like I said, recognize I'd never shared that before. And then I think the part that you're accustomed to hearing around where this passion for working with mothers comes from is my son was then about a year old, and I registered for my master's. And a couple months into it, I found myself slumped on the kitchen floor against the cupboard, crying to my husband, telling him I didn't feel like I was coping. And that's when I decided to change the topic of my master's to focus on mothers, modern day motherhood. And I was particularly curious around the interplay between self care and coping, because I realized that's a big part of what shifted for me was I no longer did the things that I loved doing, either because I was tired or didn't have the time or expect. I mean, there are a million different things that could have contributed. So I think um, that's probably where the research kind of took off, and my interest was kind of planted in that space. Um, and then I think 5 years later, as you know, a pandemic and all of that, I then graduated. And when I saw how well I'd done, I felt like, you know what, this can't be in vain. Like I've got to do something with this. I really felt like the universe was giving me a sign. And so yeah, I part of what I'd written in the acknowledgements, and I want to read it out because it really resonates with me. In my acknowledgements, I'd written, I give thanks to divine in all its forms for making this master's a part of my life's journey. May it benefit the world and may great things be born from it.
Wow.
And I think that last bit, when my results came in, was the universe's message to me to say, you can't sit on this. You've got to do something with it. Yeah.
Wow. I can't wait for our next podcast when we dive into detail about that. Because yes, that is, I remember still how you kept saying, and I know we'll get there in this conversation too, but how you kept saying that, but I don't feel qualified yet. And then the next time we met, you got your results, and I played that back to you to go, do you now feel qualified? And yeah, I remember that very clearly. So,
Yeah.
wow, thank you for sharing. Yeah.
I want to say before you share, what comes up for me as you speak now in this very organic space is how sometimes as women we feel like we need that permission as well.
Yeah.
Um, and that's just something. And again, we've got many podcasts ahead, but that as you were speaking, I was like, yeah, I remember that. Why I just didn't feel ready until I felt like I had the authority. Nothing's changed besides 80,000 word kind of document that somebody's going to stamp on. But the reality of what I experience and what I know hasn't changed. So yeah, that's been interesting. But let's talk a little bit about your passion and where that comes from, because we had a shared moment there.
Yeah, it's interesting when you actually just referred to your birth that I kind of I had a visual reminder of mine, which was not as pretty and uncomplicated. And I think that's perhaps probably the starting point of what was really, really a fundamental shift in my value system. So I've always grew up extremely independent. I love once I finally found what I wanted to do professionally. I just I could pour myself into that for days. And I remember when my husband and I got married, I flippantly a few times said to him, "We'll have babies. I'll pop them out. You can look after them," because he's not a career person at all. He's not. If he doesn't have to work, he wouldn't. If he wouldn't. And I, on the other hand, I'll work for free. It's just who I am. And so, yeah, I said that a few times and I meant it. And then after that, which to me, and there was no like medical trauma, it was just a personal, traumatic experience for me. Once I held my baby in my arms, everything shifted in me. So that matrescence, which I now know what it is, back then I had no clue, really, really hit me hard. And after 3 months of maternity leave, I could not I could not go back to work. And so I still remember the day when I went into the office and I spoke to my boss and I contracted first, I think, an extra month, and then actually agreed to take a 50% or proposed to take a 50% salary cut in order to have the privilege of working half days in the office. I would practically, it looked like me working the rest of the 4 hours at home at night, but nevertheless, that's what I was willing to do in order to care for my child and be present, physically present in her life for as much as I could. And every subsequent decision after that, turning down promotions, turning down opportunities, and to a large extent, the key motivator behind me stepping into self-employment. And even then, saying no to clients, saying no to opportunities which would involve me traveling. I think everything shifted for me that moment that he was born. And so I have, now she's 15 and a half, for 15 and a half years, I have been torn between my love for my children and my love for what I do, and are constantly confronted with how do I do both well without neglecting either. And I think, and out of that personal experience and the extent to which I know I have fundamentally, inherently changed, and having grappled with that a new identity and how to become comfortable with that, is something that have awakened in me a desire to walk that journey with other moms. And I realized that had I known more to expect this, I probably would have navigated it wiser, or at least with less strain. And that it's normal, that it's not as weird, and it's actually something that I didn't have to navigate on my own. So it's really through that lived experience that I want to walk with others. And I think what I often hear from people, you've reflected back to me and friends, is that the life that I am able to live right now, and the way in which I have boundaries in place that allows me to be next to every sports event that my children play. And I'll look around and I notice that there are very few that have that opportunity or that are there. I guess if there's anything to showcase that it is possible, to give others the courage to also start making those changes in their lives, then that's something that is important to me.
Yeah. I think, Rentia, just as you were speaking, something that came up for me, because I was having coffee with another mom on the weekend, and her circumstances are very different. She's got 3 kids and she's chosen to continue with her career, and she's fairly senior in her organization. And she and I were chatting how it's really not one size fits all.
Yeah.
It's what, and I like the word you used. You said how to do both well. And, that's important, because often people talk about being a good mother or a good parent. And I think that's such a misnomer. I think every single one of us as parents are really doing the best for our families and for ourselves. And that does mean that we'll make, different decisions at different times. And I think just what I love about the space that we find ourselves in is an openness to the fact that you and I might now find ourselves in a similar space, but a huge respect for women who say, hey, got the kid, want to stick it out in corporate, and actually, I don't want to be at every sports game. And that's okay too,
Exactly.
Yeah.
As long as she does it because she wants to, not because she feels like she has to, but she wishes she was there. That's the difference. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, and I feel like we're going to a place we hadn't intended to go, and I do want to say it. I think that's part of the conversations we'll be having, is how sometimes as women, we don't know where that drive is coming from. And for us to create the opportunity to investigate that drive a bit and go, is this really what I want? Or is this me living into an expectation that's external to me or internal to me? So, yeah. But the one thing I do want to pick up on is that drive and dedication that you spoke into around, doing both well, is something that I still admire in you. And I know I've shared this with you. From where I'm standing, my experience of you is you manage your boundaries so well, and that's something I really that continues to be a journey for me. And I hope to again grow into. But
Thank you.
I think in the essence of time, Rentia, what we
Mm.
haven't shared now that we've shared a bit about ourselves is how we met. So
Yes.
yeah, if you want to maybe
Mm.
start there around how we met.
Uh, yes, absolutely. Wow, that feels like a lifetime ago. I think, for which account, it's probably around 6 years already. And I remember it was a very, very different topic that got us together. I think, if I recall correctly, you found me on LinkedIn because you were looking for providers to support your corporate your in your corporate role back then, and so we met for an explorative discussion. And I still remember back then I had this desire to do this work. I've even created little flyers, but nothing has come of this. So, yeah, it was one of the other streams that I deliver on, psychometrics specifically, that I think you reached out to me on. And somehow in our initial introduction of getting to know each other, this kind of popped up, and we discovered this mutual pattern that in every subsequent conversation just grew and grew and grew and grew, and became the thing that really do well, one of the many things that really do unite
Mm.
us.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know what your recollection of that time was.
Yeah, I've reflected on the fact that it's been more than 6 years, like you say, and it doesn't feel like it though. Hey?
Mm-mm.
It feels like new and
Feels like
old at
two.
the
Yeah.
same time. Yeah, I couldn't have seen this coming. I really couldn't. Like if I reflect to that early conversation and you asked me to project into the future where it would lead, this was not where I would have even imagined. Um, so yeah, I reached out to you, like you say, as a possible supplier. And again, that's the past. I want to focus on what connected us, and I think there was a strong values resonance. And I know that was some of the feedback when I met with suppliers. They're like, "Oh, she spent so much time talking about personal stuff." So I think that was definitely a connection for me around how values came out in our conversation. Obviously, we discovered that we were both moms, and I think that was a thing. And then I think the stirring in my soul was when you'd spoken around, going out on your own after your kids were born. And we obviously didn't go into a deeper conversation at that point. It was quite a superficial introduction. But that stirring in my soul was a huge curiosity around how she's done it. And I don't think I recognized it immediately, but somewhere deep inside of me, I probably wanted the same thing. But it hadn't made consciousness yet. So I think that's the stirring that was there in the soul. Um, and then, of course, you took a very keen interest in my research. When I said to you, I'm doing my master's, and you said, what on? And I remember now when I reflect back on that conversation, I did see you light up. But obviously at the time, again, we didn't go into the detail. You didn't go, hey, Sarika, I've kind of, had an interest in wanting to coach moms, and I've done these flyers. And actually, what I don't think I shared with you at the time is even before I started my research, I piloted a program called Play School for Moms with another collaborator of mine that Wendy, and we'd run a couple of sessions with that. So I think the thing for me that really, and the words that resonate for me, is I feel like our spirits really, and our energy really resonated with one another. And then I guess I fast forwarded, to December 2023, the graduation, the research having been done. And I think earlier when you were speaking, you touched on something important. When that happened, I felt like I was ready, because I felt like I was now, and you'd use the word qualified. And I think the word for me is more, there was a rigor. There was an academic rigor to what we were wanting to share and say and do. And so, yeah, we kind of started talking about it. I said to you, I'm ready. We weren't sure
Yep.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, maybe you come in a bit here because, this is something that's basic
Yes.
because it kind of just emerged.
It is, and so to me too, there's certain like pointers I remember, but you're right. I remember feeling an energetic shift from intention to action. That we've
Yeah.
always shared the intention and the desire to do something, but suddenly there was this move in both of us to actually go, and now what are we going to do? What is the first thing that we're going to do? And I think as we unpacked that, we felt like, okay, well, we want to create a launch event, and the most
Yes.
comfortable, the most comfortable that we both felt was to talk about the research, because
Yeah.
that's it's something we work. And so just as we started talking more about this, it just actually evolved quite naturally. And then I think we had a date because it was Women's Month, or and yeah, I think maybe even
Forgotten about that. I'd forgotten about
yeah.
the reason. Yeah, right.
Yes, and so we got a venue and we started inviting people, and there were many things, but I think it was about a week or two or three before the event. We're like, okay, well, we're calling it a launch. What are we launching? And then we started getting practical around whose brand are we doing this? Is it going to be under
Yeah.
my company? Is it going to be under your company? And suddenly, I think, and this to me is still one of the most I think I don't know what the English word is for that. Fascinating things, that how
Yeah.
we came up with the brand, the Motherhood, which is so true to how we operate.
Yeah.
I can see you remember it clearly too.
I
Do you want to
do.
share
I
that?
do. Thank you for triggering that for me. I mean, I'm noticing the two of us, like little energetic, I want to say giggling schoolgirls. It's all kind of stereotypes I'm holding there. But um, yeah, thank you for taking me back to that. I'd forgotten about Women's Day, and and yes, I remember calling it a launch, but we didn't know. And then you're right, it was about 2 to 3 weeks before the event. That conversation around the branding triggered for us, and I remember very vividly the day. It must have been a Wednesday, because my husband and I were driving to our dance class in Hot Bay, and you and I were sending each other voice notes, very energized voice notes. And I think what I shared with you at that point is like, about the motherhood, because I kind of dubbed my research the Motherhood Conundrum, what you and I had spoken about, and the event was being called the Motherhood Conundrum. Um, and I remember kind of going like, oh God, it's so obvious. Rachel's going to think like, duh, like. And when I shared it with you, you kind of came back and said, oh yeah, absolutely, that resonates. And then, we got Charisse involved with the designing, and within a couple of weeks, we had a logo, you know,
Yep,
and we knew what we were launching.
absolutely.
It was the motherhood. And I think, in addition to it being the brand thing that resonated for us both, was that there was a sense of community in the name, in the name itself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. In March this year, can you believe?
Just yeah, no, Sarika, and I think that's for me. That's often I forget how much we have actually
Yeah.
been able to bring to life this year. I think because it doesn't feel like doing.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm also grateful for is when it starts feeling like effort, or when we start getting anxious, we're going, then it's not ours. Everything that has come to life this year has come to life naturally, organically, and it feels like we are just enablers of something that wants to happen. And yes, so I can look back and I go, wow, we yeah, I think we've really manifested a dream that have the seeds were planted long time ago, and I think our coming together 6 years ago feel like that was a bit of water that was given to both of our dreams. And yeah, the last year feels to me like that it has sprouted, and we
Yeah.
don't exactly know what it's going to grow into. We have some ideas and thoughts and dreams for it, and it's lovely to know that it's not really up to either of us. And it is just the beginning of something great. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think as you share that, Rentia, what comes up for me is just a bit about that branding, and I think it's useful maybe for us to just touch on the meaning behind that first. And I think, if you think of our logo, and as I say this, I'm thinking, oh, we need to ask Charisse to put it up for us, as we speak into this, um, is, we've got the words the motherhood, which in itself, gives that sense, like I say, of community, etc., that we're wanting to build. I think we've emphasized that by capitalizing the H in the word motherhood, with that emphasis on that being our intention. We're not the leaders of this thing. This really is about a coming together. And then the word that in the middle, the word mother, that we chose to put that in strong, bold, capitalized, a little bit smaller, so it doesn't overpower, but there's something about the strength, that I think is there. And then the fact that the word mother is in the center of the, and then hood on the other side, is, I think, bringing mothers back into focus, bringing our needs back into focus, which is, again, in our other episodes, we can talk about the mother as the center. And then I think the use of colors, so sorry, that word mother in a different font to the and the hood, because those are softer fonts, and more feminine and that. And then I think the use of colors, I think the heart that we've put in as the first O in mother, um, giving that sense of warmth and joy, that parenting brings. And then I think, of course, at the end on our D, the little yellow butterfly, that marks almost that transformation. That once you, I've got goosebumps as I say it, but that once you become a mother or a father for that matter, your life is changed forever. And I just love how our logo brings together what we're wanting to do, what we stand for, what we're wanting to achieve in a way that's so integrated, with that softness and the strength at the same time.
Thank you, Sarika. That's absolutely beautiful. And yeah, I think everyone that sees our logo afterwards will not look at it in the same way. Nor will I. You've reminded me of a few things that I've even forgotten. So thank you. I realize I'm having a look at the time, and we probably do have to close this off for today. I think in terms of the introduction, and I definitely look forward to engaging with you in our next episode around deep diving into your research and exploring that a little bit further.
Thanks, Rentia. I think, one of the things we said we wanted to do as we got to the end of our sessions is maybe take a moment to pause and reflect. And maybe now there's that invitation to those listening to this to maybe hit pause on this podcast. And even if it's just 1 minute, to kind of reflect on, what's come up for them, out of this conversation. And, and if they feel in a space where they're drawn to maybe think about something that they want to do as a result of that, or do differently as a result of that, or do more, do less, as a result of that. And even as I say that, I go, if I had to reflect on this conversation, what would that be for me? And I think my learning today in getting here was taking the calm with me. I mean, the whole backstory to it. And I think it was that thing of remaining grounded and giving myself the time to pause. I'm okay. There was no major emergency. So I could come here and be, fully as myself. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you so much for partnering with me in this space. And I think we're sharing this journey together. I find myself very expectant, and quite relieved as we get to the end of this first recording, and very expectant for our follow-on conversations. It feels like a beautiful, very natural space, and I'm really grateful. And I think as I close, I'm curious, if I invited you to just, for a moment, reflect. Is there anything that comes up for you? Yeah.
There is actually, sorry, Ken, it's something I didn't necessarily expect. But as I was journeying through the stories that got us here, both your and mine, I'm just struck by how even when we were there living it, we didn't always see where we were led, where things would end up. And it just, yeah, I think there's something in that that's freeing to me to go, you know what, I can actually just afford to, I can actually just continue showing up and doing my best every day and trust and have faith that what must be will be. It's not all up to me, and things will come together, even if I don't see it in the moment. So yeah, I think that I am encouraged again around a greater purpose and greater meaning outside of the micro moments where we only see in part. So yeah, it's my
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. And I guess cheers for now.
Bye.